Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American College of Financial Services Alumni Association Cocktails and Conversation webcast. My name is Brooke Butari, and I am the Executive Director of Alumni Relations at the American College, and I have the pleasure as serving as the co-host for today's webcast, The Power of the Wisdom of Three with Tony Boquet. This afternoon, I'm looking forward to getting to know one of my colleagues at the college a bit better and hearing him share his knowledge on the power of the wisdom of three as it pertains to fear. It's a very timely subject right about now. So now, I know some of you might be wondering, what does this topic have to do with financial services, the industry, and why is the college even offering this webcast? As a college, we believe in lifelong learning, and given the circumstances surrounding COVID-19 and the impact it has had on all of us, we saw these cocktails and conversation events as fun opportunities to provide expanded knowledge that relates to the industry or life in general. I'm sure so many of you will find insightful takeaways from Tony's presentation today, and I encourage you all to enjoy it. Before we get to know Tony a bit more and dive into the presentation, please take a moment to grab yourself a cocktail or beverage if you haven't done so already. And if you saw in the reminder email leading up to this, today's signature cocktail is Tony's drink of choice, a signature hot and dirty martini, which I hope a lot of you are enjoying that with Tony today. I am not brave enough to do that. But I would also be remiss if I didn't thank our event sponsor, One America, for their generosity in supporting our many events here at the college. So thank you, One America. Lastly, feel free to submit questions during the webcast via the chat or the Q&A, and we will try to respond to them as the conversation evolves or as things come to mind. So go ahead and submit those. So Tony, I think you're ready and I'm ready too. Let's kick this thing off here with an audience poll as we do our official cheers here to the event. So cheers, Tony.
Cheers, Brooke.
Thank you, thank you. So we'll have everyone here go ahead and have a sip of your beverage and take a second to respond to the poll question up here. Who has experienced fear for any reason during the past month? We'll give you about 10 more seconds here.
Brooke, that doesn't look like a dirty martini you're drinking.
No, Tony, I told you I'm not brave enough. I'm going to stick to my glass of wine, but tell me a little bit here as we get started, about the hot and spicy and dirty martini and why that's one of your favorites.
Well, I'm originally from New Orleans. So New Orleans, this is the dirty martini of New Orleans. They add a little bit of Tabasco sauce to the recipe to give it a little kick. So it has the flavor of the olive juice plus a little nab of hot in it. And you can add as much heat as you want. This one is a little red, so I think I added a little too much. But it is good.
It looks good. It looks good. Well, Tony, I'm going to kick it over to you. And thank you again for taking the time to be here with our audience. And just looking at the numbers of that poll to get everything started, it looks like the majority of the audience, about 76, so 3/4 of those who are logged on here live have experienced fear.
Yeah, and this time it would be pretty amazing if they didn't have some form of fear. And fear comes in a lot of shapes and colors. So, what a person feels is fear. One person may feel differently about it than another. They may not even recognize it as fear. So it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting topic. Before I get into the fear component of this, I did want to dig in a little deeper into the power of the wisdom of three and tell the folks a little bit about where that line has come from in my personal journey. I've been studying decision making for about 20 years now. Started as a very young man, always wanting to do the right thing. Didn't always accomplish that, but I did know the difference between right and wrong. And I had an intensive look, an intent look at wisdom. So I went to the person that supposedly is the wisest man of all, King Solomon. And I read about 111 books in 1 year on the topic of decision making or in his life, the life of King Solomon. Most people only know Solomon through the Bible, but the Egyptians, the Arabs, the Greeks, they all wrote about this interesting man. So it was a very interesting look at a gentleman that lived some 3,000 years ago. But what amazed me was whether you were reading material from the BC era or you were reading material written today, we still make the same silly decisions and the same silly mistakes we made when Solomon walked the earth. So that was kind of interesting. And one of the things that led to the power of the wisdom of three was Solomon's interest in the number three. In numerology, the number three means solution. And Solomon was a big advocate, if you will, for numerology. He studied numerology. The man was brilliant. He could read and write 7 languages by the time he was 16 years old. Back then, to read or write 1 language was a big deal. But to do 6 or 7, that was amazing. And that was unheard of back then. So he really intrigued me. The more that I read, the more I wanted to read. And it kind of put me into a balance of life system. Because the power of the wisdom of three, the more you delve into the number three, it's really eerie how many problems can be solved with only 3 things. Solomon was the first one to discover this, I believe, because he saw fire. You only need 3 things to start a fire. And that was man's first problem, according to Solomon, was creating fire. And it's only 3 elements you need to start a fire. We only need 3 things to live: air, water, and food. We are a 3 environment being, having 3 personas: a personal, a spiritual, and a professional persona. We have 3 atmospheres: land, air, and water. There's 3 types of clouds, 3 types of rock. We live on the 3rd rock from the sun. So the more and more you looked into it, it was all scientific. All of what amazed me was all of the great philosophers wrote about Solomon's threes, and most of them founded natural laws on this premise that there's 3 ways to solve a problem. There's only 3 solutions to a problem. That amazed me. Solomon said that every problem could be solved either with the right answer, the wrong answer, or what he considered the concession, the acceptable concession, is the way he put it. So it was very interesting to me that so many things floated around this number 3. Through my research, I'm up to 89 natural laws that all have only 3 components. And these are natural laws. We can't change them. Mankind cannot influence them. And that kind of intrigued me. And then a little later into this, I started looking at how education played into it. Being with the college, being an associate of the college, education's always been important to me. Even before I came to the college as an associate, I was a student of the college. Webster says in the definition of wisdom, it's knowledge obtained through education, experience, or ethical and moral values. So those are the 3 components that make up a wise decision. You have to either have education and or experience and use ethical practices when making that decision. I went a little deeper into this using Solomon's techniques and Solomon's teachings, and it seems like every ethical decision we make, and we make literally thousands of decisions a day, every decision we make will use those three components in the decision-making process. So that the more I looked, the more it just intrigued me. And let's see if I can expand this slide program. This is the power of the wisdom of three based on what Solomon said. Wisdom can only be obtained through the selfless application of trusted knowledge from the combination of three sources, effectively used as a solution to a problem. Any business only exists to solve problems. They solve problems we can't solve ourselves. If I have a leaky roof, I can't solve that problem. I don't know how to do it. So I'll hire a professional to come out and fix my roof. That's the way we solve problems. If we can't solve it ourselves, we hire someone to do it. If your child is sick, has a fever, you're going to go to a doctor because you may not be able to solve that problem. We hope that doctor has education, the experience, and of course, we hope that they use ethical judgment in solving our child's problem. There's no wise decision that can be made without that ethical component. Back to the American college teaches education. We do so with a 3-year experience requirement for all of our designations. They have to have 3 years of experience to use our designation. And we teach ethics in every course we teach. Ethical values mean something to the customers, to our clients, to our associates. Ethics means something. So we have to use all three of those things when we're looking for a wise decision. A lot of people look for balance in their life. I believe balance comes from doing what Solomon believed is operating your life as three personas all in one, where we have a personal persona, a professional persona, and a spiritual persona. We have to be able to use all three of them every day to be balanced. Because if you try to be a different person at work than you are in your real life, it never works. It never works. I've hired a lot of people in my life, people that are their natural self, do the best job. And of course, the triangle of knowledge just expands that. When you look at those three spheres, that's pinpoint in the middle is where a wise decision can be made. We know a lot of things. So our education is pretty big. Our moral and ethical values will float based on where we're at any given moment. And our experience keeps expanding. Let's talk a little bit about how fear plays into this. Because one of the things that intrigued me about this model that I'm looking at here, there we go. When you look at this model, it caught my eye. I didn't create the model. This model was created by a friend of mine. This came out right around the time that we were hitting the peak, if you will, of fear toward the coronavirus. We didn't really understand the virus, so there was a big fear zone. Anytime you look at a fear zone, that's our experience. So I don't want to read to the audience everything that's on here. I hope you can read it. It's large enough for everyone to read. But what fills in that fear zone is dependent upon our experience. We're going to be more fearful if we've never experienced something before. So those three different colored spheres, the first one is going to be your experience. I have a lot. Go ahead, Brooke.
Yeah, if you could just dive in and perhaps just read one of those so we could really delve into that as an example here, just for those who might not be able to see it full screen here too. But I think it's a great conversation and an opportunity for examples that are so timely right now.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In the fear zone, we get mad easily. When you're first or confronted with a fear, if you don't know how to handle it, you're going to be mad at yourself. You're going to get frustrated with yourself, especially if you're an adult. Children may not feel that, but adults will. Adults will also feel like they have to complain a lot because they're uncomfortable with themselves. So complaining frequently is a sign of fear. Spreading emotions related to the fear and anger, that's very discouraging, and that just feeds additional fear when we do that. But it's an emotional reaction to fear. The better your experience in whatever you're fearful of, the less fear you're going to have. So the smaller that sphere is going to be. What's kind of cool about this too is, like nurses, you take nurses or doctors, for example, they were less fearful than someone that didn't study medicine. I have a lot of medical people in my family. The nurses said, let me find out more about it. And they knew exactly who to go to get the answers they needed. I'm not a doctor. I don't know those things. So I was more fearful than they would have been. Children are more fearful because they don't know either. So as adults, this is how we handle fear. First experience. The center sphere, the learning zone, is education. You have to build education to solve a fear or to calm a fear. The first steps you do is you start looking up information. In today's world, that's easy to do. The problem with that, though, is you don't know whether you can trust the education. Can you trust what you're learning? When doctors can have conflicting answers to the problem, it's hard to determine which one's right. Which one should I follow? The CDC comes up with something, and then a doctor disputes it. That causes more fear. Because I'm not getting the education I need to solve the problem. The college, the reason I work for this college is because we can solve the problems our students need to help their clients with their problems. I have 100% confidence in all of our coursework being factual and being true, so I can trust it. When you're facing a fear of an unknown that you don't personally know about, you're going to be conflicted. Who do I listen to? But once you do find that person or the entity to follow that you trust, then you're going to start doing the things that are in this sphere. You're going to start giving up things you can't control because you understand, I can't control the virus. I understand that. But how do I deal with it? How do I live with it? Just because I can't control it doesn't mean I don't have to control. I have to be able to control how I'm affected by it. So that learning zone is the educational part of the triangle of knowledge. And then the third sphere, the lighter blue, is where our values and morals come in, where our training comes in. Training and values and morals, moral beliefs, moral values, ethical values, all of those things are in that blue sphere. You're going to start reaching out to others to help them solve their problems. You're going to feel comfortable because you've been educated and you're experienced. The more you have in the value part of this sphere, the broader that sphere is going to be. So if you can imagine, the more you're comfortable with those darker blues, the more you're going to be able to reach more people in the lighter blue. Does that make sense, Brooke?
Yeah, and that was just one of the things as I'm sitting here wondering, is that circle the largest and most encompassing? Because you realize that you're not going to know everything right away, and you're going to have to learn and continue to learn to grow. And you understand that realizing some of that fear is part of the growth, and that you have to have all of these things to be able to grow and make these decisions.
Yeah, so true. And when you get comfortable knowing that I'm going to be fearful, and you can use COVID, you could use your work life.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what's creating the fear, but you have to go through these three zones. You have to go through the experience part is the first part you're going to face, because you don't have necessarily the education in whatever's causing the fear. If I'm well educated, for instance, I'm well educated in financial planning, in life insurance, I'm well educated. So if a client comes to me with a fear, I'm not fearful at all.
Mm-hmm.
They're fearful because they don't know how they're going to fix this. They have a problem, they don't know what to do. But if they come to me, I already have the comfort level that I can help them solve their problem. So I'm not going to be fearful. Just like a nurse would not be fearful if you bring them a medical question. They're going to be able to answer that question based on experience and training, education. And of course, hopefully they are morally aligned and ethically aligned with you. If they are, it's a perfect match and you're going to get the right answer.
Right.
Make sense?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's so applicable right now with everything taking place, from financial concerns to health concerns to school and education concerns. It's a great way to think about it and really bring yourself back to this level to approach and understand things before responding. And I think it's one of these great tools that people can really incorporate into their lives as they're responding and interacting with others, for sure.
So true. So true. In the blue zone, they talk about, I thank and appreciate others. If you remember in the early part, when the pandemic had reached critical stages in New York City and in certain areas, there was a lot of appreciation going out to those first responders, the nurses, the doctors, the police. We were saying how thankful we are as a country. That's because we had gotten through the fear and we were in that outer band.
Right.
So if you understand where you are in this model, you can relax a little bit and say, okay, I'm past the fear zone. Let me start learning as much as I can and as quickly as I can. Sometimes we try to delay learning. If we delay learning, we're also expanding the time we're going to be fearful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of students don't get that. A lot of students say, well, I'll learn that later, or I'll get that designation later, or I'll do this later. I'll study later. I'll take the courses later. Well, all they're doing is extending their fear zone. That's all they're doing. Because if somebody comes to them for a solution and they don't know the answer, then now they're fearful.
Right.
The client's fearful and the advisor's fearful. That's never a good combination, because the advisor has to be able to put the person's mind at ease. They have to be able to do this. So this sphere, and that's why I fell in love with this model, it uses the power of the wisdom of three to conquer any fear. It doesn't matter if it's corona or if it's a personal fear going through in your family. This will work every single time because it's a law. It has to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. Any questions?
You know, Tony, so I'm popping in here. There's no questions that have popped in here yet, but someone did bring up the acronym relating to fear, which is interesting, and I'd love to hear your
Please
take.
share.
Fear, FEAR, of course, false evidence appearing real, which is interesting because as people are hungry for knowledge or learning about things, you know, they're having to also differentiate between things that aren't always real or factual or don't paint the whole picture. So if you would like to comment on that acronym, that would be interesting.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, you know, one of the things I learned a long time ago is faith and fear have the exact same definition. Exact same definition. It's the fear of the unknown. The difference is if I have faith, I'm looking at it from a positive aspect. If I have fear, I'm fearful, I'm scared. It's a negative connotation of the same thing. A fear and a faith. The faith just assumes I'm going to come out on the right side eventually. Where if I stay fearful, I'm always going to be worried. The worry is constant because of the negativity that fear brings. So education conquers that. If we can learn as much as we can conquer fear. Yeah,
I think that's a great comparison.
The slide that I have on the screen now is the 3 human fears. There's only 3 human fears, by the way. We could be fearful.
Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly right. You know, most people think, my God, I'm scared of everything.
Right.
That's true. But it falls into 3 categories: fear of harm, fear of abandonment, and fear of unworthiness. Those are the 3 fears. And all of the fears in our life fall under those 3 categories. What amazed me with the COVID pandemic was our government used the fear and the solution to solve our problem.
Oh, interesting.
Because if you remember, we had to stay at home. We had to stay at home, not for us, but for those we love. That was the abandonment. We came together as a community because the only way you can solve the fear of abandonment is through community. And the government used it perfectly to make us want to stay at home because we didn't want to affect others. We want to wear masks, not to affect others. Not because we feel harm necessarily, but because we don't want to hurt others. So abandonment was the tool they used, and it worked. It worked 100% because it's a law. It has to happen. We have no control over this stuff. If you understand where your fear lies, you can fix it with those 3 things. If you fear harm, you have to find the courage. You have to find the courage to overcome that harm. If you don't find that courage, then you're going to be fearful for a long, long time. I know I have a psychologist friend of mine who shared with me when I was putting this information together. He shared with me how many times that people live their entire life fearing harm to their self. And he says that's because they do not even want to discuss the courage to overcome it. You have to have that courage, and you may need help to reach that courage.
Right. Yeah, that's a big step to get there.
It is. Some people can do it easily, or what we think is easily. You know, just the other day I saw in the news where a young police officer, he was like in his 20s, He showed up to a burning mobile home, ran into the mobile home to pull two children or two people out of the home. I'm sure he felt fear for himself. I'm sure of that. But he found the courage to go in because he didn't want to leave anyone in that fire. Mm-hmm. So it's so important that we understand what is the fear so that we can seek the right solution to the fear. If it's a fear of abandonment, we need to seek community. We need to seek that community because when we surround ourselves with others, we don't feel abandoned anymore.
Right, we don't feel alone.
You don't. Mm-hmm. If you know that everybody is wearing masks, then you don't feel abandoned. You don't feel insecure because you know that they're there with you. And unworthiness, you have to find love. When you're unworthy, and this is the one that this psychologist that I referenced, this is the one that most people get hung up on the most because people sometimes feel unworthy to be loved. And that's a self-image kind of conversation that has to take place. And you know, that's another presentation that goes into a lot deeper. Somebody told me this presentation gets very deep, and yes,
that's another whole drink right there for that.
That's one. Another martini there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are taking the time, you know, right now to really delve into talking about some of these things really deeply. So it's interesting, you know, even to touch and dabble on that because so many people do, you know, experience that with struggles with relationships and needing that, that recognition, that support. So, you know, I can totally see that and make that connection, but I can see how other people might not think, oh, that's not what I need.
Well, and one of the things that kind of, again, I'm all about the wisdom of three. Mm-hmm. There's three wards to stewardship. In other words, we are stewards to time, talents, and treasures. So our time, we just have so much of that to give to others. We have just so much talent we can give to others. And we have just so much treasure we can share with others. But when there's any kind of pandemic like this, we need to look at where can we use our wards of stewardship. We need to look at that and say, okay, I am blessed. I have what I need. I'm not fearful anymore. How can I help others be less fearful? Mm-hmm. My wife is doing that through making masks, face masks. She's made literally hundreds of those face masks for others. That's her way of giving back and using the stewardship talents that she has and giving back to solve the fear problem that others have.
Right, and she did that through growth with learning and educating herself on the usefulness of masks. Like, I can see how it all ties into everything then.
It does. And, you know, it's our thoughts, words, and actions that will affect everything that we're talking about.
Right.
Everything we do starts with a thought. For instance, going back to that circle, that diagram, it starts with a thought that I'm fearful. I am fearful of this. Mm-hmm. So that starts the movement of things. Then we start voicing it. Then we end up doing actions because of it. Those actions can be good or bad. The thoughts can be good or bad. The words can be good or bad. And we see that in everything that we do. And we can see that in every newscast that's on television these days. Everything will either be positive or negative in thoughts, words, and actions. The trick to solving a fear is making sure that you stay positive that I can get through this. And I need to learn what I need to do. I have to use my past experiences because guess what? There's three triads of time: past, present, and future. Mm-hmm. Not 4, not 7, 3.
Right.
So we have to understand this and tie all of this together. And it's so easy to remember 3 things. It's very difficult to remember a dozen things.
Right. Right. Yeah. So let's talk about this. Using this in our everyday life.
Yeah.
You talked about your wife. Let's talk about an advisor using this.
Beautiful. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
That's perfect. You know, as an advisor, and I was an advisor for over 30 years. I was an estate planner, so I have a lot of background in that area as well. When a client comes to you, they want you to solve their problem. They're fearful of something. Sometimes the advisor has to make them fearful, though.
Oh,
That's,
interesting.
yes.
Yeah.
We sometimes have to convince someone they should be afraid, and they're not yet. Especially when you're dealing with a topic that's hard for people to swallow, such as life insurance. Somebody has to die for me to get that. So this isn't like, let's have a cocktail hour and talk about death, you know?
Right. But they have to have the courage to understand and talk about it and know it's going to happen.
They do. So sometimes the advisor has to bring the fear to the table and has to make sure that the client's uneasy, because we do not act until we're uneasy. You think of anything in your life, you will not buy the next car until you don't like the one you have. You're not going to buy a new house just to buy a new house. You're going to need to have a reason to do that.
Right.
Well, it's the same thing with investments or with insurance. You have to be fearful. If I don't save, what will happen? If I don't save enough money and I reach retirement age, what's the worst that can happen to me? So as an advisor, we need to use these 3 fears. We need to use the education, experience, and our morals and ethics to solve problems for others. I hated the word problem solver. And yet, as an early advisor, I was called a problem solver by so many people. God, you solved my problem, Tony. Thank you. You solved my problem. I hated it. I hated being called a problem solver because in my mind, it elevates the problem. I wanted to elevate the solution. So back in 2009, I started using the word solutionary because I believe we are solutionaries. I believe we each are solutionaries. We live to solve the problems for others. That's what advising does. I am only as good as the problems I can solve for them. If I can't solve their problem, they don't need me. They can go somewhere else and get the right solution somewhere else. So I'm not a problem solver. I'm a solutionary. And I try to get the other advisors in my life to understand that. You have to be able to solve problems. You have to quell fears. You have to be able to be at ease when they're in the worst times of their life. I've delivered a lot of death claim checks in 30 plus years in this business. That's the worst time that these people will ever have to endure, the loss of a loved one. And yet you're there to help them get through it. That's a tough thing for any advisor to do, yet it's one of the most rewarding things an advisor does. The same thing goes for quelling their fears. It's so much, for me, it was a puzzle. People would bring all of their problems to me, and I would try to piece them together into a puzzle that made them very happy. So the image that puzzle, the final puzzle, when we put the final piece of their financial plan in place, the image had to be exactly what they wanted it to be. Yeah. That's what this is all about. That's what the 3 spheres when you understand my experience can only take me so far. My education can only bring me so far. I have to have a broad talent base in ethical and moral values to bring me further out. Because if I don't, I'm going to stop trying to solve problems. If I don't care about other people, if I'm ethically inept, then I don't really care about you because I'm unethical. If I'm unethical, why am I worried about your problems? You know?
Right, right,
So,
exactly.
so it's only the ethical people and the people with high moral values that are going to be able to broaden their reach deeply into their practice. So when you get all three of those areas and you're hitting on all three spaces, you're maximizing your own potential in your talents, your time, and your treasure.
Your treasure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, Tony, I'm just thinking back, you know, on a personal level, before I started working here at the American College, I worked in fundraising. And I remember meeting with a few folks, and whenever they made charitable donations to the institution that I was working for, they always made a gift that ended in the number 33. You know, and it's light bulb right now because I remember asking them and they said, well, when you find out, you call me back and let me know, but I'm not going to tell you. And, you know, they were working in the medical field, interestingly enough. So, you know, so many things are clicking in my head right now, reflecting on this conversation.
I can't tell you the number of times I've gotten emails since this journey started. I could share dozens of experiences where people came to me after hearing one of my talks or experiencing my book or, you know, learning this from other people, where they say, Tony, did you ever think of this? And that's why I'm up to 89 natural laws that all start and end with threes. Mm-hmm. That cannot be a coincidence. That is unbelievable. When you start piecing together all the dynamic laws of physics, all the laws of physics, gravity depends on three things, only three. That's deep. That's amazing. There's no way that's a coincidence. And it's kind of cool when you can, you know, I've read a lot of books in my life. And I have some dear friends that have written books about 21 irrefutable laws, or, well, it's hard to remember 21 things. It's very easy to remember threes. Very, very easy. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have the number three. And numerology, it's very important people understand the number 9 is 3 threes. The number 12 is 4 threes. There's 4 seasons, but they're all 3 months apart. So when you understand all this and you start putting the physics into it, you're looking at the natural laws of science supporting how we should be acting and the things we should be doing to solve our own problems. If you can't solve your own problem, you can at least reach out to someone who knows how to solve your problem. That's where our designations come in. That's where our master's degrees come in. Is I tell people, if you have a problem and it's in the insurance field, you deal with someone that has a CLU, a chartered life underwriter. You want the best to solve your problems. You don't want somebody that's practicing this part-time. That's part of the problem in today's society. In today's society, think back to Solomon's time. 3,000 years ago, they had no schools. So education would have been a very tiny sphere, a very tiny circle in a person's life. But experience was massive, because if my father was a bricklayer, I was going to be a bricklayer and I was going to learn from my father. and my experience would be amazing. And of course, ethics and morals meant everything. You stole, you lost a hand. So there was ethical pieces that you were drawn to being ethical in your life. In today's world, the spheres are backwards. Today, education is massive because of the iPhone, because of the internet. People could look up anything today and find information about it. That's a blessing. We can learn so much that we couldn't have learned before. But the problem is, how do you know you can trust it?
Well, right, that's what I was going to say, is it's a blessing and a curse, right?
It's both, that's correct.
Right, there's so much information out there, and how do you differentiate between what's real and what's not? And then does the information cause more fear the more that you know?
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean, how often do we get a diagnosis and we Google it on WebMD, you know, and then it leads you down a path, which leads you down another path.
You know, one of the funny things about WebMD, I was speaking to a doctor. He wished they'd never have come out with WebMD. He says, you don't know, every single week, I have people coming into my office self-diagnosing themselves because they read something on that. And they waited too long to be treated because they were self-diagnosing. And that's real life stuff. Mm-hmm. Because they thought they could solve their own problem using tools that are untrusted. I give a talk to teenagers, and it's amazing. Every time I give the talk, I ask first, how many of you have ever used a GPS to get from point A to point B? And of course, all of them raise their hand.
All their hands,
everybody.
Right?
Yeah, everybody does that. I said, how do you know that GPS is right? How do you know that? And they say, well, it usually is right. I said, usually.
Usually.
But not always. I said, I ride a motorcycle. I can tell you that a lot of times the GPS will take me down a road I don't want to be on a motorcycle. They'll take me down a gravel road that's unsafe for a motorbike. But it didn't ask me that. It said, can I get from point A to point B? And yes, I could. But it might not be the safest way to do it. We need to be more conscious about trusting the sources before we make a decision. Today, we make decisions before trusting the people. Or we trust the person because, like with Facebook, a person will share something that's not true, but because I trust the person that shared it, I'm more willing to look at it. But they didn't do their research before they shared it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to act based on that person that I trust. So it's a complicated world we live in, and it helps if you have as many tools in your toolbox as possible.
For sure. You know, Tony, I'm going to pivot here. There's a couple of questions and comments that have come in here. One question, it said, so is the ethics giving the education and experience the compass? And in parentheses, it says being selfless and doing what's in the best interest of the clients.
It is, yes, yes. You know, I used to, when I hired people in this business, I tried very hard to hire based on more so on ethics than their education, for instance. I could teach them, if they had a high school diploma, I could teach them what they needed to know to be successful. But if they were unethical, there's not a whole lot I could do with them. Mm-hmm. If a person wants to be unethical, they will be unethical.
Right, right.
And I spent 8 years as a expert witness for legal cases. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Most of the time, if the person would have been vetted properly for ethics, the company wouldn't have hired the person to begin with. When you show that to a company, it opens their eyes, but then we make it very difficult in today's society to ask questions about ethics and morals. we make it very difficult to do what we need to do. And that's, again, that's another dynamic. That's why I love ethics so much. I've taught ethical training for years because of that. And ethics can be very, very individually, how would I say that correctly? It's an individual thing. I could see something as ethical. You could see something as not so ethical. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to determine that, but that's the truth. Whoever put in that comment, they're 100% right. The ethics should be the compass that we follow.
For sure, for sure. Well, I have to give a shout out here to Edward Bartling. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you or not.
I do know Edward, yeah.
Oh, Edward. Well, Edward's chiming in and reminding us that for the number 3, there are only 3 types of hair follicles, in case you were wondering.
I didn't know that. Thank you, Edward.
We're learning a lot here today.
I like it.
And that Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the start of civilization. So there's the number 3 at work again.
It's amazing. It truly is amazing.
And okay, so that's all the questions I've seen come in here of late, but I would open them up to the audience here if anybody else has anything else that they'd like to put in here. And you know, if not, we'll hang on here for a few minutes. But
yeah, don't be bashful. You know, if you have a question, feel free to ask.
Well, Tony is the modern solutionary. That's what he deems himself here.
That's what I call myself, yeah. Amid other things too, bro.
Well, so we have included, you know, Tony's email is up here for at the college if you'd like to reach out or stay in touch. LinkedIn is definitely the place to connect with Tony. If you have not already connected with him, he is just a rock star for the American College in terms of sharing and connecting. So I would encourage you to definitely reach out and connect with Tony via LinkedIn. And then even more, if this topic has really piqued your interest or you'd like to learn more, Tony's book is actually available for purchase on Amazon. And so we've listed the websites for that as well. And Tony, do you want to share with everyone about your book, how it benefits charity as well?
It does. I don't need the revenue from the book. The book has been a blessing in my life. It's helped me tremendously grow personally. I'm a better person because of that book. I'm a better person because of the people that have read the book and sent me some amazing letters. When I wrote the book, I didn't think, you know, on my website, I put my personal contact information. I didn't think anybody would do it. I didn't think I'd hear from anybody. And I was completely wrong. I started getting emails and letters from all over the world. And some of them are very touching letters. Some of them are troubling in ways because we all struggle making choices in our life. We all do. I mean, me included. I call myself the modern solutionary, but I am the farthest from wisdom of anyone in this audience today. I don't think I'm wise. I'm like Socrates. I know I'm wise because I know nothing. But, you know, it's amazing to me that when we learn more about ourselves, we can benefit more people by doing that. And it's not about us. It's about who we can help. So, yeah, if you want to reach out to me, I'd love to talk to you. My LinkedIn page is open. All of my contacts are on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to reach out if I can help you. Great.
Well, Tony, one final question here before we look to wrap up today's Cocktails and Conversation. You said that the education sphere changed over the years. How about experience and ethics? Can education and experience change our ethics?
Sure it can. Let's go back.
Yeah.
You know, education can change everything. It definitely changes our experience, because the more educated we are, the more people the more topics we will be knowledgeable about, the more we'll be open to talking about those topics. So it's going to widen our contact base. It'll widen everything that we touch. And then of course it will definitely expand our ethics and morals. One of the things that I didn't mention that I thought, about after, was when we're growing as children, we are taught from our mothers and fathers, or our guardians, if you're raised by aunts and uncles, whoever raises you will be the first teachers, and they will teach you ethics and morals from the earliest of ages. So that's where our first growth comes in, is from our ethics and morals, because that's where parents spend most of their time teaching the children, is teaching them those things in the early parts of their life. So we continually expand, and this total circle will exponentially grow as each of the spheres grow. That's a great question. That must have been a teacher that said that. That's amazing.
Not sure. I'm not sure. Well, let's see. I think we have time for one other question here that just came in. Oh, no, just some compliments for you, Tony. People super thankful for you taking the time to share your knowledge. And
Well, thank
yeah,
you.
having a great conversation again. I can't thank you enough for being here. And let's go ahead and throw up our end slide here just for everyone. We have, a ton of events lined up, and if you'd like to hear more from Tony, Tony will be presenting again in August as well. So we encourage you to check out all the webcasts and events taking place at the college on our website. And we look forward to having you join us for a future Cocktails and Conversation or a webcast, or at an event whenever they start happening again soon. So thank you again.
Can I add one more thing about this slide?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I've been an alumni of this college for a very, very long time. And I think this time the college is at the best place we've ever been in my 30 plus years affiliated with this college. So I can't stress enough and thank you enough, Brooke, and the entire team at the Alumni Association. They care about our students, and we care deeply about their clients. So please, if you're not affiliated with the Alumni Association and you want to be, please reach out to them. Those links are live on the page. Donate your money. Of course, we're a nonprofit college, so we do take donations readily, and we need your money. We need your donations, because we try very hard to keep our prices down for our students. And as a nonprofit, if we can get more people donating, that'll keep our costs down tremendously.
Absolutely. So, and it can expand education to everyone.
Oh yeah, so many more things we can do. Yeah.
Right. Let's keep learning. Let's keep learning.
Yep. I saw we had another comment or question. I don't know.
Yes. A little bit of praise for you, Tony. Thanking you for all that you do, from Kyle Herndon. And thanks, Tony. I love your observation that education and experience would expand ethics. It's a great reason to keep being educated. So on that note, it speaks truly to what we did today. We learned a little bit and we expanded our knowledge.
We did. And thank you, Brooke. Thank you for being a great co-host.
Well, you're certainly welcome. Thank you again, everyone, and we hope you have a great night.